Tonight, we've partnered for the first time with the Cusp. The Cusp is a new telemedicine company out of California devoted exclusively to women's health and specifically menopause care. I love this idea. I'm very excited about the Cusp. One of the few silver linings of the COVID crisis is that the world has opened up to the idea of Zoom doctor visits, which I've personally been a long believer in. I think medicine really can be done over the phone well, because so much of medicine is about storytelling more than anything else. Some of you know I have a background in something called narrative medicine, which is really about that, about storytelling in medicine. So I'm very focused on the idea that we need practitioners who really listen to us, our stories, our symptoms, our concerns. And menopause, I think, is particularly well suited to this type of care, because every woman's journey is different, and it's really about understanding your symptoms at a particular time along the way. As we all know, it's so variable. It changes so much. From, in my case, 45, 46 was when I started perimenopause. I'm now 51 and fully menopausal. I haven't had a period in a couple of years. I had terrible hot flashes. I'm on hormones. Everyone's story is different. Women don't want to be on hormones for different reasons, et cetera. So having an expert who can really take the time to listen to you is super key. The Cusp is at the cutting edge of this kind of care, and they work with you either in appointments or you can book individually. Appointments you can book individually, or as part of a larger membership package that gives you more frequent access. So they're here to kind of talk about things about, whether it's insomnia, brain fog, hot flashes, anxiety, incontinence, kind of everything. They're a go-to menopause site. So tonight we're going to focus specifically on weight gain, why we gain weight in middle age, why it's suddenly so much harder to lose, what we can do safely to try and keep ourselves feeling healthy and not bloated, and so on. I'm really happy to welcome Dr. Erin Conlon, who I met for the first time the other day. Erin is on the staff of the Cusp. She's an expert in perimenopause and menopause. And of course, as you know, menopause treatment includes all sorts of lifestyle interventions like IF, exercise, diet, sleep, and then medical interventions like HRT and naturopathic solutions. As part of her practice, she puts in countless hours around counseling on lifestyle, and she's found that coaching around successful IF really works. Kind of like when we were talking last week to kind of get to know each other, I said, isn't that also like Weight Watchers? I mean, I'm sure a lot of us here have done Weight Watchers, and when you do it, it's successful when you go to the meetings and really follow it. So IF, like a lot of weight gain, a lot of diet, not weight gain, weight loss measures, works really much better when you have someone helping you with it, a team of people or a coach or a best friend, someone you're doing it with who's helping keep you accountable and everything. So she's here tonight to share her knowledge and tips, and we're really grateful. So, small disclaimer, what you hear today is informational only and not actual medical advice, but the Cusp can provide personalized medical advice to members who sign up. I mean, they are actually licensed doctors, but this as a Zoom call on the Wolfer is not, is informational, not medical. So Erin, let's start from the beginning. Welcome. Hi, you look really pretty. Let's start with just why do women have a harder time losing weight during menopause, during and after menopause? Give us the basics, please.
All right, we'll just start at the beginning. One of my mentors always calls this the perfect storm, which I think she's right. So we've got the aging process, and naturally around middle age, our metabolism just slows down. Doesn't matter your gender, that's just what happens. Not fair, but it's still just what happens. We also have a decrease in estrogen levels. We've got increased insulin resistance. During midlife, we also have often a change in habits and an increase in life stress. You can probably think like, yes, now my kids are a little bit older, maybe they're a little more tooty, I've got to do a little bit more with my career right now. There's just a natural shift that happens as far as social obligations, which also plays into the greater picture of who you are.
Wait, I have to question, that's interesting. So you're saying kind of there's just more stress in general as we get older?
Often there is. I will often hear women talk about how they've got more on their plate as far as work is concerned, and usually kids are a little bit older. So when your kids are really little, they need a lot. And then when they our teenagers, sometimes they need a little bit more, and it's a different type of stress that one is managing.
True. We've got the
So,
sandwich generation thing, right? So the kids and the older relatives, right?
yeah. And I always like to look at the entire person. I don't want to just say, you are belly fat, let's work on that. No, I want to see what else is going on. And then we'll kind of peel layers apart from there. Because of all of these changes, we see an increase in central adiposity, so fat around the midsection, and that has a lot of adverse metabolic consequences. So we know that with that, we see an associated high cholesterol, poor blood sugar regulation, often elevated blood pressure, and then cardiovascular disease. And remember, cardiovascular disease is the #1 killer for women in the United States after menopause. So something that we really want to pay attention to and try and stay ahead of. So if we're finding that belly fat come on, we think, ooh, maybe we should start working on these things now before we're kind of too far down the line and we're seeing some things like cardiovascular disease.
Okay, so that makes me ask a question. Sorry. Like I have definitely more belly fat, there's no doubt. How do we know if we have really too much? Like I feel like I'm quite healthy. I exercise, I eat well, I probably drink a little too much, but I'm sure like a lot of women on here, like I'm heavier than I was 5 years ago, but I don't feel like I'm fat. But when do you know if you really have too much belly fat?
So I would say having a primary care provider is probably a really important element to middle age, to playing the middle age game right. We like to have the opportunity to do some screening blood work, which would give us a better idea of what's going on as far as blood sugar regulation, your cholesterol levels. We like to check in and see what blood pressure looks like. There are some people who will use BMI as a measurement. BMI is horrible. It's not a great tool. So I'd prefer more objective measures like the blood testing.
Right.
And with that information, we're able to more thoroughly evaluate someone's health.
Okay, it's an interesting question just because I think obviously we get down on ourselves so much about weight gain and there is that issue of body acceptance, but of course you don't want to veer into being unhealthy, right? So that balance I find tricky. All right, so we're much more likely to gain weight for all these reasons. So what is IF? Most people on here presumably know what IF is, but just in case there are people who don't and are curious about trying something new, why don't we just briefly review what IF is and then we'll get more into the weeds.
Okay. So there are plenty of different types of intermittent fasting. So I'm just going to kind of label them out as I understand them. I'm sure there's probably something coming down the pipeline. Somebody's got a new idea or a trick in.
Don't eat it all ever.
ever. Crumbs only, and that's it. So we've got the 24-hour method, and that's fasting for 24 hours, 1 or 2 times a week, usually non-consecutive days. The 5-2 method is pretty similar, but instead of completely fasting on your fasting days, it's really just severely limiting your caloric intake to something like 500 or 600 calories. Again, those 2 days are recommended to be on non-consecutive days. There is the moderated alternating day fasting, and you just eat normally every other day and then fast or have really limited 500 calories on the other day. And then my favorite is the time restricted eating. And within TRE, time restricted eating, there are a couple different options or many different options. Most stringent, you will see some people fasting for 20 hours and having a 4-hour eating window. A more common would be having an 8-hour eating window and then fasting for 16. And then there are 10-hour eating windows and 12-hour eating windows, with the rest of the time being a fast. To me, a 12-hour fast and 12-hour eating window is probably just what everyone called eating. probably everything up until the 70s. And now we call it something fancy, like time restricted eating.
Right. Often when people say they're doing 12, they go 12 hours. I'm like, well, isn't that normal? I'm actually kind of surprised you said that time restricted eating is your favorite. We didn't talk about this before, but I would have guessed that your favorite would have been like 5-2 or something. Cause I feel like I've developed a sense that the more successful version is when people fully fast for 24 hours or like, severely restrict. So is there one that's more successful than others, or is it really individual? And if so, how do you know which one works for you? I mean, I've done whichever one, 16-8, sometimes 24, but really 16-8. It really hasn't done much for me. I do feel good when I'm doing it, but it didn't do much in terms of weight loss.
I don't think that there's any one diet that exists on this planet that is the diet for all people on the planet. We are all just different. We've got different genetics, different situations and circumstances, and different preferences. So I don't think that we can say this one is the one for us all. The reason that I really like TRE is because it's consistent. And even though a lot of our personalities do not want to have a regimented schedule, our body loves that. Our body loves to do the same thing at the same time every day. And that is what the TRE really promotes. So to me, the TRE is really a lifestyle, and it's much easier to maintain. It's something, if you're doing the 16 hours or a 10-hour, a 12-hour or a 16-hour, you're still able to kind of integrate into society. You can still go out to lunch, and it's easier to kind of maintain. We've learned a lot about circadian rhythms in the last 15 years. And we used to think, the stomach's kind of like a boiler room, and you can just toss down whatever you want, whenever you want, and the stomach's like, I'm ready for it, here we go. But it's actually not like that. Each organ has its own little body clock, and kind of their own little checklist of to-do items. And the stomach is getting ready for food, because we know food comes down the pipe at 9 o'clock. So it's all geared up and juices are flowing, and then nothing happens. And the stomach is like, all right, well, I guess I'll move on to the next item. And so it moves on to the next item, and it goes throughout the day. And then it's getting time to wind down, and the stomach is saying, okay, well, kitchen is closed. And then all of a sudden we put down a big old meal, and the kitchen is, or the stomach is very confused. And where do we put this? And now I'm shoving things in different places, and I'm not organized in the way that I'm digesting food, because that body clock was not ready for it. So we are malleable. We are able to adapt to these different changes, but is it ideal if we have an opportunity to just kind of go through the same patterns most days? Probably.
Okay.
But to contrast that, there is some benefit to having this little bit of unpredictable challenge. So just like doing a really hard run or really hard workout, that puts a little bit of stress on the body. And the body responds quite well to that short-term positive stress.
Right, like sprinting, right? Or whatever it's called, what's it called? That exercise when you do big bursts of
training.
Exactly.
Yeah, high intensity interval training.
Yeah.
So that's where we can find some benefit with those longer fasts, but we're not fasting every single day. So it's a little short-term stress that gets put on the body, and the body.
Do you think there is a benefit to kind of choosing a restricted schedule, a time restricted schedule, but then occasionally doing fasts? Yeah. And so can you talk about ketosis? Like why fasting, and this whole idea that fasting is good for you, right? That seems to come with a lot of this IF talk. Like, I'm actually going to read one question from a member. Someone wrote in and said, I've been intermittent fasting for 13 months. My thyroid has gotten better. Eyesight has improved. A1C back in order. I was borderline pre-diabetic. Strange bumps like boils have disappeared, and I can tell inflammation has reduced. People say I look much better, but I still haven't lost as much weight as I thought I would, nor have I dropped much in clothing size. I'm now postmenopausal and had my gallbladder out in 2010. I put on 50 to 60 pounds between the two. I'm also addicted to sugar, which happened when I quit drinking. So I know that's a factor, but the whole reason I started IF was because you could eat whatever you want in your open window, to your point about kind of lifestyle. So I'm now doing 17 minimum, working to 18, hoping to start a 24-hour fast every couple of weeks. So she's saying, but I'm an emotional overeater, so I know that's a factor also, but do you think bumping up my closed window and doing 24-hour fasts will help? I don't know terms, but I don't think I've done what I need to do to get into ketosis. My body obviously isn't eating my fat stores. Do you think the extended fasting will help? I think this is a very common question for people who are doing this, right? Who want that bump that you talk about.
Yeah. Yeah. So ketosis is complex, and I'm not going to pretend to be an expert in that area, but essentially what happens is our liver stores some fuel in a form of glycogen, and we can run on that fuel for 10 or 12 hours. After 10 or 12 hours, we've kind of run through that, and our body says, well, I still need some energy. Where am I going to get it? And that's where we get that switched to ketones. That's a great way for us to lose weight. So I see where she's saying, if I do a little bit longer of a fast, is that going to get me there? And possibly it could be the thing. Every person is a little bit different. You're already surpassing that 12-hour mark. So I'm assuming that you are popping into ketosis, but it's going to depend a little bit on what you've been eating before and how much you've been eating. And those details are a little bit beyond my scope.
Of course. Well, it's very individual, right? It's how much are you really eating during your window, and are you drinking? Yeah, there's just a lot of different factors. Tara Fields just asked, is there a difference between the optimal amount of time in the eating window for men and women to be effective? So can men do less? I don't know.
I don't know the answer to that. It's an interesting question. Each person is going to have a different body mass, different muscle mass. And so if we've got this big guy with a bunch of huge muscles, he's going to be burning more calories throughout the day than we've got a tiny gal who doesn't have a huge amount of muscle mass. So hard to say.
Yeah.
I would speculate that it's going to be different, but it's going to be individualized.
Yeah. Another question from members is, can you discuss what constitutes a clean fast? So we've heard different philosophies on this, from like a splash of cream and coffee is okay to anything remotely with a scent or flavor breaks your fast. Like my understanding is anything except for tea or coffee breaks your fast.
That's my understanding as well. So anything with a calorie.
Right.
And then coffee, we're talking 4 calories, 5 calories. So yeah, by itself. Yeah.
But as coffee always, sometimes when I'm trying to diet, I'll drink like diet soda, which I don't normally drink, but diet soda is supposed to be terrible for you when you're dieting, right? It's just bad.
Yes.
And
it's very tricky for our brain says, oh, I think that's sugar. Let's get ready for some of that. And it's very confusing for our body, not to mention that it's a whole bunch of chemicals that we don't really need. So.
Yeah. But so that's interesting. So it's bad because the chemicals are just bad, but it's also actually sending your body a different message, so it resists somehow.
Yeah, through a complex process, it's confusing for the body.
Very interesting. All right, let's see. Another question. I can fast for 12 hours, but anything beyond that is hard for me. I feel like I'm starving. My food issues come up, and I don't want to control myself so much. Any tips on some next baby steps or a next level with intermittent fasting for someone like me?
Sure. So if you never exercise and we said, well, tomorrow you'll be running a marathon, good luck. That would be horrible, and it would be really hard. The same goes for intermittent fasting. If you have been eating 18 hours a day just because that's the schedule and lifestyle that you've been living, never going to shame anybody on any of it. then you suddenly want to shrink that down. Your body, like we talked about, has a program and is used to that. And now all of a sudden, we're not getting that same intake. We're not getting that same reward if we were using food as a reward. And that can be really challenging. Um, Food is much more than just calories, right? It's an opportunity to socialize. It's delightful. We do sometimes, and maybe sometimes inappropriately, use it as a reward. Um, so there's a lot that goes into it. We already talked about Weight Watchers and how having somebody on your team can be really, really beneficial. It goes for every kind of diet or any kind of lifestyle change. Doing something alone and making a massive switch is hard.
Right. So if you have a friend, if you're trying to go from 12-hour fast to 13-hour fast, just talking about it. I mean, often we find in our community, like we do dry January threads. We do threads where we're kind of supporting each other, and you can go there and be like, help, I'm starving. And someone will say, you know, give it another hour. And that helps. The support helps.
Right. Drink a glass of water and you can do it.
Yeah. Is flavored seltzer okay? Is calorie-free flavored seltzer water okay? It's a good idea. Like
My
those.
understanding, yes.
I think so too.
Bubble
Yeah.
waters, yeah.
Yeah, I think so too.
There,
Someone,
there are some seltzer waters that also have juice in them, so just be aware of what you're drinking.
right, because those aren't as good because they're going to spike your sugar. Someone says, I experience lightheadedness after 14 hours. Is that my limit, or will my body adjust as I add an hour to the fast? I would think you would adjust.
I would adjust, but I would also be cautious. I don't think fasting is the end all be all, and I don't think it's good for everyone. If you're having some sort of symptoms, it's best to talk to your provider because you might have some particular situation that needs just a little bit of supervision in order to do it most healthfully.
That makes sense. Yeah, I mean, certainly if you're feeling weak or sick, you should take something that's going to make you feel better. Have a little bit of food. Are there any particular foods or supplements that are good to use while doing intermittent fasting? This person says, I found that my energy levels have dropped, especially in the morning. Any suggestion for energy boosting? Not
Well,
caffeine.
not caffeine. Yes. When I think about energy in the morning, I start thinking about the night before. So what actually happened to make you feel rested or not rested when you wake up in the morning? Ideally, if you've had enough sleep, the body should be able to have enough fuel on board, and you should feel energized enough to go through your morning. So if you're tired in the morning, it's probably not food. I would think more about sleep. And I would love to talk about sleep for just a minute if we can.
Please
Uh,
let's, because it's such a huge issue for women our age. And I
it
agree with you. Yeah. I will say briefly that I started having such terrible hot flashes that that's why I went on HRT, because I finally realized the effect of not sleeping well at all for 6 months has got to be really bad for my health. And even though I was nervous about going on hormones, my mom died of breast cancer, I really felt like it was a trade-off. Like I can't not sleep. And I was really not sleeping. So please, let's talk
right.
about sleep a little.
You are right on. I mean, sleep is really the foundation of our health. You know, we often talk about diet and exercise and stress management and sleep, and those are the pillars of health. Well, it's not actually like 4 legs of a table. Sleep is really the foundation of that pyramid. And upon that foundation, we're able to add those other elements of our health. But if you do not sleep well, you are not going to want to exercise. And even if you want to exercise, your workout isn't going to be the same quality. If you are tired, you are not interested in having sex at all. So libido is lower. If you're tired and you didn't sleep well, your mood is probably poor. And your ability to really make healthful decisions when it comes to diet is really just going to be diminished there. You know, we've probably all had that day where we had really terrible sleep and the only thing we want to eat for breakfast is a giant donut and a latte. Probably not our best choice. Okay, on occasion, but probably not the best choice. So sleep really is the foundation. And in order to get high quality sleep, we need to kind of think about what we do before we even get into bed. So during midlife, you already talked about it, Nina. Hot flashes, night sweats are super, super disruptive to sleep. So if that's something and you are suffering, please don't suffer. You do
Yeah.
not have to do it. There are so many options,
No,
and
it's
it's not just the hormones.
I completely agree with you. It's funny, actually, we're publishing a piece this week in our newsletter on sleep, on all the different ways you can treat it. And I always feel a little sheepish when I don't want to push hormones at all on anyone, but I sleep like a baby now. It has changed my life. I sleep like I used to sleep. It's just heaven.
Yes.
So I agree with you. Addressing sleep is hugely important. So hilariously in the chat, people are very worried about their coffee. So we need to go back to the coffee thing.
Okay. So sorry. So sorry.
Okay. So coffee is okay, but no milk. Someone says, are there any benefits to a dirty fast, i.e. one that involves coffee with milk? Well,
Well, enjoying your morning coffee would be the benefit
is a
there.
benefit, exactly. But no, I think the answer to Mimi is that if you have milk, you are breaking your fast. You are no longer fasting. Karen McHugh asks, what about the butter coffee? That's a good question. Bulletproof in the AM. So that oil that you put in your coffee.
Yeah.
And someone's asking about oat milk. These women are not letting this go.
Okay. Anything with the word milk in it is a no. If you are following a ketogenic diet and you're working that, if you're coupling that with your fasting, then there is a place for kind of the bulletproof coffee. But the first calorie in is the calorie that breaks the fast, right?
Okay.
So it's just a different.
And now I'm also going to backtrack a little from in the chat. And I know you said you're not an expert on this, and that's totally fine. But someone says, can you speak a little more about circadian rhythms? I never knew that. I didn't know this either. It's fascinating. I never knew that each organ had a clock. And I want to learn more about this and adjust my eating patterns. I don't know. So if you have anything more you can say about that, I don't really know what that means. Like,
Can I give like a little resource, like a plug for something I'm not at all involved in?
please.
Okay. There is a book that was published, I think in 2018 by Dr. Sachin Panda, and it's called The Circadian Code, and it is an incredible resource.
Oh yeah, I vaguely remember that. Okay, I'm typing it in the chat. Okay, all right, girls, we're moving on from milk. Someone else is like, what about unsweetened almond milk? Okay. Milk breaks your fast, apparently. The best thing to do probably would be to just maybe have your coffee. Well, have tea. I mean, tea has caffeine. I'm sorry, I'm not also as sympathetic on the subject. I weirdly don't drink coffee. I just never have. So I can't totally relate to the desperation, but I am sorry. This is such a hard question. So I'm going to open it up now, I think, to encourage people, if you want to raise your hands, we'll turn off the recording and kind of have more of a conversation